If you are a fan of PlayStation, grew up with gaming in the 90s, a fan of Naughty Dog, or just really like 3D platformers, it's likely you know about the orange marsupial known as Crash Bandicoot. Crash has had rises and falls, and rose up again over the years, only to somewhat fall again and leaving the fate of his franchise up in the air. But when most people talk about Crash Bandicoot, it's usually the original PS1 trilogy. These games are what defined Crash Bandicoot and put Naughty Dog on the map. You know, until they kept milking The Last of Us. I am no different. The PS1 trilogy is my childhood and the peak of the franchise. Which is why I'm doing a 3-episode retrospective series on each game, with a bonus at the end of the third video. So put on your blue pants, grab a drink, as we start things off with the very first game, Crash Bandicoot. Crash Bandicoot released in 1996, but I wouldn't play it until 1998. I was roughly around 7. Now I specifically remember this because it was my 7th birthday that I got my PlayStation, and it came with 7 games, and one of those was Crash Bandicoot. Now, I know for sure that I was definitely really into cartoons at the time, so when I saw the cover of Crash Bandicoot, it really stood out for me. I thought, whoa, this guy looks like he came straight out of my cartoons. Crash is actually the first PlayStation 1 game I ever played, and technically the first 3D game I ever played, so it was definitely an interesting experience transitioning from 2D to 3D. Considering that Crash came out at a time where platformers, especially 3D platformers, weren't really a thing, then you have Mario 64 comes in and paves the way for what 3D platformers could be, and now here's Naughty Dog trying to do their own take on it. They did a pretty good job. Crash 1 isn't my favourite, no, but there was a strong foundation. The characters were fun, quirky, just like my cartoons. Spinning boxes were satisfying. Some great visuals for the PS1. The platform obstacles provide a challenge. Torna. Can't forget about Torna. She's a hard girl to forget. I probably have a bit of bias because of my history, but considering this is Naughty Dog's first ever 3D platformer, it's honestly impressive what they managed to do. Now, I actually watched a fantastic video by the user Reliable Rhubarb, The History of Crash Bandicoot. I definitely recommend it. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll also put it on screen so you can see it. But basically, from what I learned from that video, like all sorts of the stuff that Naughty Dog had to do, including tapping into pieces of the PlayStation 1 hardware that actually wasn't being used, as well as their overall issues working with Universal, it's kind of a miracle that Crash exists at all. If you're watching this, you likely know Crash's story, so I won't waste your time. Instead, I'll summarize. Evil scientist wants to take over the world by experimenting on animals, turning them into warriors for his army. Crash is one of them, but it goes wrong and he escapes. But oh no, Crash's hot girlfriend, don't judge me, is still prisoner, so we have to go rescue her. That's pretty much the gist of the story. You travel through the islands, having to deal with the area's inhabitants, even going up against Cortex's creations, and then eventually climbing his castle to defeat him and rescue Torna. This was also the first game that I played with voice acting, and yeah, okay, it was only in the intro of the game.
But Dr. Cortex, we have not determined the cause of past failures. Moron! This Bandicoot will be my general, and he will lead my Cortex commandos to world domination. This time I shall reign triumphant. We are closer than ever before. Quickly, into the vortex!
But I still feel like it added to the characters, and that's the thing. Crash isn't this type of game that needs a deep story. It clearly worked with what it got, and the focus is obviously the gameplay. So let's talk about the gameplay and controls. I never felt even back in the day that Crash had the best controls, but definitely not the worst. I also wouldn't say they were quite tank controls, but wasn't the smoothest. This is a game where precision is key. You are making a lot of jumps that, if you miss, will likely result in losing a life. It was crucial to get used to how Crash feels to control, and even then, you may still have a hard time. In terms of his moveset, it's pretty basic. He moves around with the D-pad. This was before analog, so all movement had to be done using the directional buttons. He would jump with the X button and spin with the square button. Spinning was mostly your primary means to attack, and will be breaking most boxes this way. Can I just say, even to this day, Naughty Dog nailed breaking boxes in their Crash Bandicoot games. No matter how many times I do it, it is so incredibly satisfying. If you aren't spinning, jumping on boxes works as well, and certain enemies require you to jump on them. They even designed a variety of boxes or crates. The wooden ones tend to have the collectibles in the game, Wumpa Fruits. Like any platformer, you gotta have some sort of MacGuffin to collect, and Wumpa Fruit acts as your rings or your coins in the game. Breaking boxes can nab you some Wumpa Fruit, while some crates you can bounce on and get Wumpa Fruit that way. You also have arrow boxes that bounces Crash really high, question mark boxes that can be a bunch of Wumpa or a 1-up, 1-up boxes, TNT boxes that count down from 3 to 1, Aku Aku boxes, the Witch Doctor mask that gives Crash a hit point, otherwise if he gets hit he loses a life. Tauna boxes, where you collect 3 of them and you are transported to a bonus to get lives and actually save the game, or get a password, as memory cards were also barely a thing at the time. Iron crates you cannot break, but some will act like bouncing crates. Some will have an exclamation mark on them and activate something like making hidden boxes appear. Sometimes you can collect Dr. Embryo icons, Cortex's assistant, which takes you to a bonus challenge for lives, as well as a Cortex bonus for a key to unlock secret levels. When you pick up an Aku Aku, you can pick up 2 more, and he changes colours as you do. The second time he's more orange and slightly larger, even giving you 2 hit points. Collect him a third time, Crash wears the mask and gains temporary invincibility, but as long as you have a mask, Crash can take a hit, but the mask won't save you from bottomless pits. I always enjoyed the theme that plays when you get free masks.
What have I got?
So Crash's moveset is pretty basic, but designing the gameplay around boxes was really clever. So of course you can break boxes by like spinning, but you can also do various challenges with them and requires you to jump from one thing to another. Skilled players could, go on there'd be a bottomless pit, but then you jump on a box to a box and then get to the other side, and that would be like one box obstacle challenge that you could do. And that's the thing, I feel like any Crash fan would tell you that Crash and wooden crates just kind of go together. With Crash, they pretty much took the structure of Sonic and just did it in 3D. Getting the name Sonic's Ass Game is pretty funny, but appropriate given you are always looking behind Crash. It might even be that as to why I immediately felt comfortable in terms of the level design. The hallways became a staple, although sometimes they would mix things up with some side-scrolling levels, chase levels where you are actively running away from a boulder, these hog levels or animal riding levels which would return in the sequels, and even more open stages like the Temple Ruin areas. However, unlike the 2D Sonic games on the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive, Crash 1 isn't what I would call easy. Only now, one game rivaling that difficulty is Crash 4 It's About Time. I am someone who likes a challenge, but even I have my limits when it comes to games. I grew up with some Sega games being quite difficult, and then I play a game like Crash and say Rayman on the PlayStation 1, and it's fair to say that I had a fair few game overs with them. I know some people like the difficulty of Crash 1, but it's definitely the hardest of the three. And I mean, the devs have to have known that the game was challenging because they constantly give you so many lives throughout the game.
The main issues that make Crash 1 so difficult is number 1, the controls. Number 2, the precise platforming. Number 3, the amount of hazards you have to avoid with many bottomless pits. Number 4, Crash is vulnerable unless he has a mask. And I guess if you go for 100%, I'd say that's number 5.
But even as a casual, I'd say Crash 1 is still a difficult experience. How are you supposed to do this as a kid? The Dark Souls of platform might be a slight exaggeration, but it is definitely a tough game. I'm more used to it now, right? Because I've played it several times. But back when I was a kid, I just kept replaying like the same stages because I just couldn't get very far. Eventually I did. It was one of those things where it took me a long time to get from like one island to another. But I wouldn't actually really beat the game properly without using like password cheats to unlock all stages. I wouldn't do that for like years, probably not even until like my teens.
Boxes and Wumpa Fruit were not the only collectibles in the game. Crash Bandicoot introduced the gems, jewels you would receive after you collect every box in a stage. Now, Crash 1 didn't track the boxes, so you did not know if you had all of them until the end of the stage, in which the game tallies, and if you missed a box, a hilarious moment will occur where the remaining crates come slamming down on Crash's poor head.
When you miss that dreaded one box and you can't for the life of you wonder how, why it happened, where is it, you have to do the entire stage again, going through all the boxes just in the hopes that you happened to just, stumble upon it to find it. And the thing is, they get really crafty with their box placements. Don't get me started on Crash 4, but even like Crash 1, they would hide boxes behind foregrounds. Like you have those like sort of side sections, and sometimes you'd have to go like sort of behind the foreground and they would just be hidden there. So they get really crafty. But then there's also some stages where you can't get all the boxes anyway until you unlock like this secret path, and then you can get them.
Now, breaking all the boxes isn't necessary to beat the game. In fact, you could get to Cortex without getting a single gem. Getting all gems would give you a reward, a slightly different ending where you don't fight Cortex at all. What you don't know the first time is this is the other way to save. When you get a gem, the game will ask you to save or give you a password. So there's two ways to save, through the Torna bonus or through getting a gem. Speaking of Torna is just waiting for you on a bird with the 100% ending. I guess she escaped on her own or something, and you get some info on what happened to the bosses after the game.
It's just an alternate ending. However, I think what appealed to me more than anything was just that breaking boxes was kind of addicting, that I ended up seeing if I could just break them all anyway. It wasn't enough that you had to break all of the boxes in order to get a gem. You had the added thing of you not being able to lose a life. Because if you get all the boxes, or any box, and you go to the end of the stage but you've lost a life during that time, the game doesn't even tally your box count. So you have that added challenge of, I can't die here at all. I have to do this in one take. I have to get all the boxes and hope that I just perfect it, no life or anything. And I think now I'm more or less fine with it because I've gotten used to it. But back when I was a kid, I think that turned me off. I mean, you have to understand, this is supposed to be a kid's game. And I'm sitting there being like, I gotta get all these boxes, survive these challenges, these gauntlets, these stages that have like bottomless pits and all sorts of dangerous hazards. I gotta do all this to get a gem? How is a kid supposed to do that? And so I didn't. I used cheats instead to unlock all the levels in the game.
The gems you usually are rewarded with are clear gems. However, sometimes you may be rewarded with colored gems, and these have an added function. Some levels have pathways or hidden areas that can't be accessed without the correct colored gem, meaning if you are going for 100% completion, there is backtracking to previous levels involved, which pads out the game. Crash Bandicoot has such a fun array of characters, and some of them are the bosses you face in the game. You have Papu Papu, who is just a resident of the jungle area that Crash is passing through, sort of like a chief of his tribe, and I guess he just doesn't like visitors. Then there's Ripperoo and Koala Kong, two of Cortex's creations. Ripperoo is crazy, so much so he's always in a straitjacket, and he has like those cartoony swells in his eyes with his tongue hanging out. It's really goofy, but in a good way. Koala Kong just likes to flex all the time and throw boulders. Yeah. Then there's Pinstripe Potoroo, another creation, who's basically a shady businessman inspired by the Mafia, and he really likes his Tommy gun. Nice suit though. A little unhinged. The last of Cortex's henchmen is his assistant, Dr. Embryo. I like that the scientist's names are puns on the brain. He's very big on potion experiments, so much so that he kinda turns into the Incredible Hulk.
I think they actually nailed these characters, but as far as boss fight goes, Crash has never really had good boss fights. They haven't really been the strong point. I'd say it's the weak point. Yeah, the entire game, be difficult. And then you get to these boss fights and they feel very underwhelming. Despite these characters, in my opinion, being quite memorable, it's just a shame that the boss fights don't really follow suit. They are the easiest things in the game.
I have to compliment the sound design. Breaking crates sounds nice and crunchy. The spinning sound is satisfying. The ping sound when you send an enemy flying. The 1-up sound effect that came straight out of a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They really do fit the game perfectly with what it sets out to do. The music has quite the variety. I would say even now that Crash 1 isn't my favourite OST wise, but there's still some tracks that I enjoy. We've got more atmospheric music in some early levels. We've got crazy hyperactive music for the hog-wide levels. Something more mechanical for the factory levels.
What have I got?
With more creepy and foreboding music for the darker levels.
What have I got? Oh, funny, goody.
You can tell I'm not a music expert, but I think they did a fantastic job with the first Crash Bandicoot game. Crash Bandicoot left such a huge impression on me, many other fans, and the gaming industry as a whole, so much so that there's a good chance you've heard of him. And although I think the first game could have better controls and for it to be less difficult, the foundation was strong enough to warrant a sequel, and with its cast of characters, gorgeous visuals, simple yet satisfying gameplay, a solid 3D platforming series was born, and is still to this day fondly remembered, despite my frustrations with certain levels.
Of course, this wouldn't be the end of Crash Bandicoot's journey. He would get 2 sequels in the form of Crash 2 and Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped.
If you made it to the end of this video, let me know how you feel now about Crash Bandicoot compared to how you were when you first played it. Crash Bandicoot 2 is up next, so be sure to subscribe, but if you want more Crash right now, I've got a video on screen that you can watch. See you there.